You guys need supplies here? Come here. We're in the right place?
Yes, you're in the right place.
Okay. Yeah.
They really need assistance here. This is very bad. They have nothing. We gave her all of our first aid kits that we had in our car. And they're seeing a lot of things here, and they're starting to see gunshot wounds too. We're trying to get medication. We have no antibiotics.
We got some. We give it all to you.
We have no analgesics.
We have
Tylenol. That's
yeah, probably has everything, you know, really.
Well, no,
We'll take care of it. I think it comes to just the whole trunk. Everything that we all need to see. I wish we could do more. We're standing here in the center of Haiti at one of the makeshift clinics that we've helped to set up. There are doctors here from Canada mainly, and we're providing a number of medicines that we've brought down from the U.S., from the Harvard University Health Services and other hospitals, and we're providing them for the people. I was able to assemble 5 doctors to come down to assist, including a surgeon, internist, and we're working as hard as we can to provide some services for the people. But what they want most is shelter, because while sadly many people died and many more were injured, many were not injured or killed, and they would like to have some form of shelter. So we provided a large number of tents. Oh, the little girl has a hole in her foot there.
Tengo que salir por aquí obligatoriamente. Alan too. Me too.
Muy bueno.
Okay. Now, where's our hydrogen peroxide?
Yeah.
This is
No, that's just
okay, on to Dr. Sack. I have some hydrogen peroxide.
You do?
Right here. Yep. Follow that. I'm taking them some hydrogen peroxide.
Oh, you got it, yes. This is all of it, right? Is this all of it?
Yes.
Dr. Daniel. Dr. Daniel.
Hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide. Good. Okay. Okay, gracias.
I need more of this.
I get it right first. We do that. Okay.
First than anything else.
Here, and extra. And sanitizer.
Yes.
Okay, and more hydrogen peroxide. Take more.
Thank you, sir.
One thing, I want you to take care of yourself. If nothing happens to you, even a scratch.
Oh, thank you.
I have to return to you in a single piece.
Exactly. Thank you
Not in a body bag. No, in a body bag. Okay.
Lo que nos deje vuelve a llevar.
Antu. So they've taken the medicine and moved it to the side and put the baby here.
That's nice.
So, por favor. He can wear them too. Okay. Wow. I gave him some pins. Let me have the still.
Usted está en el equipo de cura.
Because we don't have enough punches to go around. There might be output any crutches. I've showed her how to use. I'm going to show her how to get by with one crutches versus two. And so her mom has that one for her right here. And she also has one, and I have to show her how to use it.
I did. She's done. She's
Awesome,
good.
awesome. So I think other people who does the cheat.
I want to give this one to this woman here.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Parce que nous va gagner c'est pas deux, ok? Donc, normalement usually, donc côté mettez pression là, ou mettez pression sur ça sur côté non marcher. So
I've got ice packs and everything now.
oh my friend, yes.
Okay.
And
I found two more crutches.
She could use some Tylenol. Where's Bruce?
He went to get the lady because one woman isn't leaving. He's coming right back. We'll get Tylenol. Yes.
Doctor, really, do you want me to put ice pack on her too? Because
She needs to put her feet up. They all need to put their feet up.
You want to break one of these for her? I found two more crutches, by the way, so we're good though.
Oh, great,
So you take these ice packs as you need them. Sí, ready. Gracias. Thank you. This is a small one, and I would like to give it to this little girl here.
Maybe, you know, you can use the record. Invasion bar will be
It's for washing the wound, to clean. To clean the wound. Wound wash, sterile, okay? De nada.
So a lot of stories.
A lot of stories, a lot of pain.
Yeah, Woody's been remarkable. But
Oh yeah.
it's so important.
that's got to be our last act. We got to get out of here. I'll go get it.
Mr. President. Oh, my friend, thank you. Mucho gusto. Mucho gusto.
Un placer tenerla acá. Un gran honor.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
This is my assistant, Tony Jacobs from Harvard. And I bring you greetings from all of your friends at Harvard, sir. And the Harvard Foundation, where you are a guest, on behalf of our presidents, the university, and the Dean of Harvard College, we thank you for all of your assistance in helping us to deliver the medicines and to take the tents to create shelter for the people. We thank you very much.
You were able to do that.
We were able to do that. Yes, with your help. We could not have done it without you and the helicopters. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Forgive my attire, but I'm just from Haiti. Just came back from Haiti.
This is the way that it should be. All right, and your colleagues?
My colleagues, I wanted to see you first to speak with you on behalf of the university. We hope you'll be our guest again. You know you're always welcome.
Thank you.
And you're one of our most special guests.
We're always delighted to go back.
Indeed, when you were there last year, you spoke to the Haitian students, and they were very proud of that. And I will take the message back how helpful you have been to the Haitian people. You have mobilized, and it must be an enormous expense to your country, the outpouring of support, and medical support, and hospitality to the Haitian people. And on their behalf, I thank you, but I will take that message back to Harvard, to our Center for International Affairs, to the President, to everyone. What you're doing.
Very kind. Very kind. Yes, well, as you've seen, just a little while ago, there was another earthquake.
Yes, oh yes, indeed.
6.23 on the Richter scale.
Yes.
A lot of people are getting.
Good evening. My name is Bill Purcell, and I'm the director of the Institute of Politics, and it is my great pleasure to welcome each and every one of you here to the first event of the spring semester at the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. Our Dean, David Elwood, who joins us here this evening very quickly after the tragic events of Haiti, reminded us all this is a tragedy that does touch us all, most especially those whose families are there in Haiti now. Members of our Harvard Kennedy School family from our forum, Jeff Barnes has his entire family there in Haiti at this moment. Other members of our Harvard University community, our neighbors in Cambridge and the greater Boston area, all were touched in a very personal way. Our panel discussion this evening is therefore entitled Haiti After the Earthquake, and will address the issues Haiti faces today, those it will address tomorrow, and in the many months and years to come. For this purpose, our moderator is Harvard Kennedy School Academic Dean Mary Jo Bain. Mary Jo is the Thornton Bradshaw Professor of Public Policy and Management. Prior to her work at Harvard, she was Assistant Secretary for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Commissioner of the New York State Department of Social Services, and previously served on the Board of Trustees for the St. Boniface Haiti Foundation, which provides support to the people of Haiti through healthcare, education, and community development. Please join me in welcoming Dean Mary Jo Bain and the staff.
Well, thanks to the panel for being with us tonight, and thank you all for coming. As Bill said, this is the first forum event of the spring semester, and it is, of course, a sad one to have as the first forum event, but certainly one in which I think all of us feel like we need to be here to have this conversation as a community. I think though all of us who watched the news coming in from Haiti on and after January 12th couldn't help but be touched and moved by what was going on, and the number of conversations that I had around the school, and I suspect all of you had around the school, of people saying, I wish I knew what to do. I wish I knew how to think about that. Was really very moving. We've asked our panel tonight to come and have a conversation with us, and we will do this relatively informally, though we will ask each of them to speak for a few minutes. And the questions we've asked the panel to deal with tonight are really three. What are you seeing in or hearing from Haiti in terms of what has happened and where things are now? Perhaps the most important question for us tonight, how does Haiti move from the place that it is in now to a place where it is better off, perhaps even than it was before the earthquake? And then the third question, what's the role of government, and what is the role that all of us can play in helping to bring this about? We have with us tonight 4 people to speak to these questions. Let me just say a couple of sentences about each one. There's fuller biographies in your program, so I won't repeat all that is in your program. Dr. Alan Counter, who will speak first this evening, is the founding director of the Harvard Foundation and professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School. He is a neurophysiologist at Mass General Hospital. Dr. Counter was the person that you were just looking at in the film. He has been in Haiti and is just back from Haiti and will be able to speak as to what he saw in Haiti. Then we have two state representatives with us. State Representative Marie St. Fleur is the first Haitian American elected official in Massachusetts and has served as a legislator since 1999. She is a graduate of UMass Amherst, and she has served in the Massachusetts House after being a law clerk at the Massachusetts Superior Court. She has ties to Haiti, as so many people do. State Representative Linda Dorsina Forey is also a Haitian American and a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives. She was elected in a special election in spring 2005. She represents the Commonwealth's 12th Suffolk district, a diverse and vibrant cross-section that doesn't quite get to my neighborhood, but almost gets to my neighborhood at Savin Hill and Dorchester. Finally, we will hear from Professor Ricardo Hausman, who's the director of the Center for International Development and professor of the practice of economic development at Harvard University. Ricardo was chief economist with the Inter-American Development Bank, where he created the research department, and as part of his work there, was involved in thinking about Haiti. He has just come back, well, you just come back from Davos, but before that, just back from the Dominican Republic, working on a project that will go on there, but also being in the Dominican Republic directly after the earthquake obviously gives him some special insight. So we will go in that order. We've asked each participant to speak for 7 or 8 minutes on the questions and emphasizing them as they wish. We'll then have a bit of a conversation here on stage and then, of course, open it to the audience. So, Dr. Counter, do you want to start off?
Well, thank you, Dean Bain. It's a pleasure to be asked to speak here tonight. I'd like to thank Dean David Elwood and Mr. Bill Purcell for their compassionate outreach in this instance and establishing and creating this opportunity to have some expression and discussion of the situation in Haiti. It means a lot to this community, I think, to have this kind of discussion. There are authorities here on this panel who can talk to you specifically about Haiti and its government and its needs. I can only speak to the experience of visiting Haiti, and hopefully I represented our community here at Harvard and each of you when, like yourselves, I had just a strong sense of sadness and experiencing through television the nature of this tragedy, how it was impacting on people, and like perhaps most of you, I wanted to do simply something to help. The one thing that sort of equipped me perhaps to be able to help was simply the experience of having been in an earthquake situation before in Ecuador, where I've served for the last 12 years in medical science, working with Andean communities that are lead and mercury poisoned, and seeing the tragic occurrence of an earthquake there that affected the lives of many. And then having served in Katrina in the aftermath, that is, with a team of doctors. And what I did was perhaps what some of you saw in the earlier report, simply call my colleagues here at Harvard who felt, as many of you, that they wanted to do something. Dr. Bruce Price, Dr. Timothy Benson, Dr. Michael Janicki, and other doctors, and said, let's go do something to help. And that's all it takes with this group. And we arranged through our own pocket money to buy tickets. I sat down and wrote different airlines, and particularly JetBlue, that deserves credit. I called my friend David Rosenthal at the Harvard Health Services and asked if he could donate medicines, which he did in large quantities, called doctors at hospitals, and just as I did after Katrina, get my little Ford Explorer and put a big box in there and go around and collect things to go to Haiti. And sure enough, we did, and we had 76 boxes packed in the Harvard yard. We simply took them to the airport, and for the first time in all the years of taking medicines to different places, I had an unusual request from the Haitian embassy. Normally people say, can you bring antibiotics? Can you bring bandage, gauze, plaster for broken limbs and so forth? In this case, I was asked, can you bring body bags, corpses? And then they said, can you bring small ones as well?
That was a very difficult moment for me, but indeed I called our Massachusetts General Hospital pathology department, and sure enough, they and Brigham and Women's provided us with a large number of body bags, which is rather difficult. So stacked in the Harvard yard were our body bags as well, and we packed all of those, and again, JetBlue at no cost to us shipped them to Santo Domingo. And from there, with the help of the President of the Dominican Republic, Leonel Fernandez Reina, who's been our guest, your guest here a number of times at the John F. Kennedy School of Government, was kind enough to transport our team and the medical supplies and the tents. And one of the things I learned from the earthquake in Ecuador was tragically many people lose their lives. Many more are injured, but most people survive, and they simply need a place to stay. They're out in the elements, and especially the children. They will not go back into broken homes or shattered places. And I observed this, and in fact, in the earthquake there in Ecuador, I gave our blankets, our tents, and indeed all of our food, because we were there working as a team from Harvard. But here we realized, so I began to call people about tents. I bought as many as I could. Eastern Mountain Sports was very supportive. They gave us breaks on some of the materials. We bought headbands with headlights for the doctors because we heard there were no lights. So we bought for the doctors down there. Little things like this made a difference. Sleeping bag for the people who are sleeping on the ground. And Will Smith, the actor, right away wrote a check, provided 100 tents for me. Debbie Allen, others, people felt the same compassion you felt. So we were able to take these things down with the help of the President of the Dominican Republic with 4 pilots and 2 techs. We took our helicopters and shuttled this material back and forth into the center of Port-au-Prince. We found centers there. We found military groups, as you probably saw earlier, who had been there working, American groups saying, we need this, we need that. And we set up our clinics right there. Dr. Bruce Price, Dr. Janicki, Dr. Benson, all of them started to work. Our technicians and the nurse who was from Haiti, Winnie Pierre. And we estimated that we served hundreds of people in many different ways. But the tents, again, were critical because people had shelter. We'll be going back very soon to take additional tents. There are many things that you can do. I know that yesterday there was a concert held here in Boston, the Longwood Symphony Orchestra. I think they've raised close to $70,000. And I think people who've called me to say, what can we do? We don't accept money. We're not that kind of group. But we will accept medicines. We will accept supplies and tents and other things that we can transport and put in the hands of the people. And by the way, one critical thing I'll say and end this, from our experience, we learned, as we have in previous situations, how to bypass the bureaucracy. In Katrina, I walked into a place where there were 600 people laying around, needing doctors. And a Red Cross doctor came up and I said, we have 7 doctors, men and women here to serve you, all volunteers. And this person said, we don't need any more doctors. And we were shattered. We looked at each other, we couldn't believe it. Now, sometimes stress will cause people to say things perhaps they don't mean. But the point is, we had learned how to bypass this and get to right where we were needed. And in fact, even in Katrina, I found a group of Vietnamese Americans, families, sitting among about 800 other non-Vietnamese people, and they were kind of lost. And we said, do you know where other Vietnamese families are? Are you trying to get there? They said, yes. And we said, you have no idea where they are? No. I was able to take a doctor's car and drive around the parishes in Louisiana until I found a church called St. Anthony's Church. And at that church were 500 displaced Vietnamese Americans. They said, we have no Red Cross, no FEMA. Same almost as in Haiti, we have nothing. Can you help us? We brought medicine, bandages, everything, again, from Harvard Health Services otherwise. But then they said, we have no way to pay the light bill. Now, remember, there were no lights in Haiti either. They said, we have no way to pay the light bill. Can you help us? Father Pham Tam was the priest there and a doctor. And we said, well, sir, we'd try our best. He said, well, could you help us with money to pay the light bill? We said, well, yes. And I'm reminded of this because it relates to Haiti. I thought we'd write a check for maybe $400 or $500 helping pay the church light bill. The bill was $11,245. We didn't know what to do. I called a former Harvard student, Sean Thomas Brady, who's now head of Credit Suisse First Boston, and told him the story. And he said, don't worry, Dr. Counter, that check will be there today. Tell Father Tam that, and we'll take care of it for the rest of the year. And I felt I got my blessings after I got that letter from Father Tam, and I've always felt the need to do this kind of thing. So we needed support to help the people of Haiti with everything from lights to otherwise. So we're right now trying to buy solar panels for lights so that people can have lights. We won't take money again, but we'll take the solar panels and other forms of assistance that you can give. So I leave you with that message, that there's still a great need. There will be a great need for a long time. There'll be great needs in government that you will understand much better than I. But they do need help with everything from electricity to shelter to other things that will help them go back to a normal way of life. Thank you very much.
Representative Simpler?
Yes, good evening. Again, I too thank the Harvard community for hosting, particularly Dean Elwood, Purcell for hosting this evening, and Mary Jo for taking the time to be our facilitator this evening. I think all of us who have Haitian descent, born in Haiti or born here, have been impacted by the devastation that's occurred. I'm going to try to contain my remarks to the 3 questions that have been posed and respond to them briefly, and then we'll be open to your questions afterwards. The question is, what are you seeing or hearing in Haiti in terms of devastation and rebuilding? Well, my first impression was, the questions for me was, where was my family when it first hit, and trying to figure out where they were, calling my mother and trying to figure out if she had heard from them. So I think if that was my preoccupation, and I'm removed from it in so many ways. My immediate family's here. I wondered what would have been the questions for those whose immediate families are right there, and many who still have not been able to locate their loved ones. So that is a question that is still out there for many people. And while some have been able to connect with their families, many still are trying to make that connection to figure out where loved ones are. The second, after understanding, we're raising the question for myself, and it took several days for us to figure out where our family was, and most of my family's in the northern part of the country. But then learning of friends of yours, or family members, or extended family who've lost loved ones, and how you deal with that. I mean, there's a huge trauma issue that is impacting not simply people in Haiti, but people right here in this state. And so what are you seeing and hearing? It's a lot of, yes, the medical and the psychological impact that this will have for a long time, both on the island, on that part of the island, and here. The second piece, that was, well, where was it essentially? Where have we been hit? We've all been seeing on CNN the impact that it has had on Port-au-Prince. But Port-au-Prince is a very large city. And if you think about the history of Port-au-Prince, it was built to take care of 350,000 people. And it has mushroomed into requiring to handle 3 million people without the appropriate infrastructure. So I would ask you to imagine Boston, which is population is about 850,000, I think, is our population in Boston. And imagine having us have to now figure out how you absorb 3 million people, which we actually do on a daily basis as folks commute in and commute out. But imagine all of that having to be right there and not the appropriate infrastructure that we currently have in Boston. And that is transportation, sanitation, public health, and all the other resources that we take for granted, energy and all of that. So put that into a country where the government is essentially dysfunctional in a lot of ways because they haven't had the opportunity to build a solid infrastructure. And you think about the impact of that prior to and then subsequent to the earthquake. And I think that is what they're dealing with. And so that is at the immediate epicenter where we've lost significant numbers of people. But you've got to go beyond that epicenter because we know and we hear from families who we know that Leogane is essentially, which is a town a little distance from Port-au-Prince. 90% of that town is gone. We know that Petit-Goâve is pretty much has been impacted. Jacmel has been impacted. Pétionville has been impacted. And there's small towns and boroughs in between those towns that we've never heard about, we've yet heard about. But they're under rubble too. And we know that from talking to people on the ground, I mean, because we are in communication with them, that the aid, I mean, I spoke with someone who actually did a lot of work in Boston. Her name was Nicole César. She's a psychologist. She began the Institute for Human Development about 10 years ago and went back to Haiti to work there. She has 250 kids that she takes care of on a daily basis. They've all been decimated. Their homes are gone. They live in Tabar, less than 2 or 3 miles from the airport. They've not seen Red Cross. They've not seen any of the charitable organizations that we hear of and that we're providing assistance to, because a lot of that aid is still caught up right at the airport and haven't been able to be disseminated in an effective way. Why? Because you have a lot of aid coming in. It's not being coordinated because the folks on the ground were not ready to receive it. And you can come and help, but if you don't know the area and you don't have guides to help you direct those resources to the right places, it is very difficult to disseminate it properly. So you have a lot of areas in Port-au-Prince itself where no vehicles ever gone to. So unless you know how to get there by horseback or by walking, then you don't know where those cities and towns, where those small towns and hamlets exist right in that. So that is exactly what they're dealing with. And unless you get a text message out from someone you don't know, or an email, which is how we're beginning to find out the extent of it. So the problem is huge, and it is tough to get its hands around when you don't have the infrastructure in place from the receiving government in order to accept the aid and deploy it as it needs to. We've lost over 200,000 people, and I think that's just a conservative estimate because we never really knew how many were there. And so we don't know how many are under rubble. And I think for many of us, it's those that we're not going to be able to ever put a face to. And that is very hard for many families. With respect to the Haiti in terms of devastation and rebuilding, I don't know. I think that how do we move to a place for better reconstruction? You know, out of tragedy sometimes come an opportunity. And I think that those 200,000 lives that we've identified should not have died in vain. I think that for the first time in well over 200 years, there's an opportunity to really change the paradigm for Haiti. And that requires that all the partners, all of us, really decide to affirmatively view Haiti through a different lens, a lens that speaks to investment and accompaniment. I think Paul Farmer testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he actually was the best testimony I've ever heard about what ought to be happening on the ground in Haiti. I think about that he was actually correct, that Partners in Health has changed the paradigm about how they behave on the ground in Haiti, and the model that they've adopted is the appropriate one. It is a model that talks about building capacity on the ground in the people of Haiti. It is a model that doesn't bypass the Ministry of Health, but says, Ministry of Health, you must function. Because if our public health didn't work here, then we would have some of the similar problems. You have to build government. A country does not function simply on the goodwill of others or on NGOs, that you need to make the government function, and we need to put the money, the accountability, and the transparency mechanisms in place in order to make it function appropriately. And if we don't do that, then we will have lost an unimaginable opportunity, and the people that we're talking about will have died in vain. So I think that for me is the sort of that, you know, rainbow, or the gold at the end of that terrible rainbow, or whatever it is that the term that we currently use. And so as I sit here and have this voice, I ask of you to ask everybody else to think of Haiti from a very different perspective, a perspective of empowerment versus receiving charity. Because a state that is built on charity, just like any other state or any other form or organization, cannot function on its own. And a state where people fly in and provide services and fly out without providing the basic capacity building and the people on the ground, you teach them to fish versus handing them the fish, I think is what we're talking about now from my own Christian tradition. I think that's what we're asking people to do for Haiti at this point. And then we have to demand accountability, not just say, because government is bigger and larger than simply the president of a country or the prime minister of a country. It is also all the ministries that are responsible for that country, all those departments and agencies. And we have to see how we invest in those ministries and departments in order to make sure that they are decentralized and function across the country, throughout the country. So I'm going to leave it there. And at the end of the day, I think the only thing I need to say as I close this piece is that Haitian Americans and Haitians must be at the center of rebuilding Haiti. No country, and I'll ask any of you who've come from anywhere else, whose ancestors have come from anywhere else, who have experienced turmoil in their homeland. I want to ask you who from Ireland would want to see Ireland rebuilt without the involvement of the Irish community here? Who from Israel would like to see Israel rebuilt without the involvement of the Jewish community here? So I say, who from Haiti would want to see Haiti rebuilt without the involvement and the engagement of the Haitian community throughout? We are a diaspora that is well and alive in every one of your institutions here. You find me an institution and you'll find a Haitian American who is contributing. We are here, we're skilled, we're disciplined, and we have the opportunity, but we don't have the planes, we don't have the boats to be able to get over there in great numbers. And so we need your help to be able to do that. And so as you build your teams in order to go to Haiti to provide assistance, we have the linguistic and the cultural competency and the professional skills to be able to support that. We have not been seen on the ground in the numbers that we would like to be seen because we have not had the access. So when you talk to your friends and neighbors, we're here and we want to be part of the recovery of our patriots on the ground in Haiti.
Representative Fori.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Kennedy School and the Institute of Politics, and I'm happy, and it's a pleasure for me to be on this panel. But what you've heard so far, I am Haitian American. I'm born and raised here. I do speak the language because of my parents. But in terms of the question, and what are you seeing in Haiti, in terms of the devastation, I would say hearing from family and friends on the ground, it's exactly what you're seeing on television. In terms of the scope and the difficult situation and the tense situation that people are feeling. As Representative Marie St. Fleur mentioned, not all of Haiti has been touched by the aid. And so my father's from Léogâne, and his family's from Léogâne. And so his brothers and sisters, you know, their house has collapsed. People are sleeping outside. We have friends who are there. And it's really in sections of Haiti, it's Haitians helping Haitians. It's people coming together in the morning and helping to pull each other out of the rubble, pull people out of the rubble that they've seen. And so there is a lot of work to do. So when CNN leaves and the story has left the papers, you know, we have to be committed, and I know we will be. And I want to thank, you know, our president and Congress, you know, for saying that they're going to stay committed to Haiti, which is our neighbors just 600 miles from our shores, 600 miles. And it has taken this earthquake for us to open our eyes and to see how are we going to change the way we interact with this island that's called Haiti. One of the questions was, how do we better off after the reconstruction? Does Haiti move to a place where it's better off after reconstruction than it was before the destruction? And I say yes. Haiti can only get stronger. The Haitian people, they're a resilient people. This is not the first time there's been natural disaster. You know, in 2008, there was the 4 hurricanes that struck Haiti, and Haiti never quite rebounded from that in order of developing economic opportunities. But even before that, you know, it was about the way we did business in Haiti and how aid is provided in Haiti. So there are 2 major things, I think, that will change in terms of the way we look at Haiti. One is the scope and scale of the earthquake, right? Over 200,000 people we're thinking have passed, and I'm sure there's more, because as was mentioned, you know, there's Léogâne, there's Carrefour, you know, there's all these areas. So it's as if everyone's focusing in downtown Boston, but Milton has burned, Hyde Park has collapsed, Roxbury's on the verge, and no one has quite been into those neighborhoods yet. And so that is the way we want you to look at it. That's pretty intense. And so that's one piece in terms of scope and the scale, so that's going to change our view. And the other piece is the new technology that's available to us in order of organizing and deploying people, especially Haitian Americans. Pulling people from, you know, you don't just have to be in Massachusetts. We are the 3rd largest Haitian population outside of Miami and New York, respectively. 4th is New Jersey. So there's a large Haitian population here, but now we're able to connect with people from New York and Florida and all over the place. And I think it's really important. And you know, it was mentioned about the Haitian diaspora, is that how do we plug into this community that's here, that are architects, that are doctors, that are nurses. And as discussions is taking place around Haiti, it is important to have the voice of Haitian Americans and Haitians at the table when we're talking about development. The federal government, before the earthquake happened, there was a plan put in place in terms of rebuilding Haiti. And so one of the questions Rep. St. Fleur and I had asked someone was, well, were there Haitian Americans at the table when we're talking about these development plans for Haiti? And I think it's really important, and that's going to be a role that all of us, play, not just Haitians, but all of us. And I think that when conversations is taking place, whether it's with different organizations, it's how do we bring people in, people who understand the language, understands the culture, but most importantly, has been on the ground and know these areas in Haiti to visit. And one of the last questions had to do, what's the role of government and other major players in the rebuilding effort? The international, and I believe this, the international community must be involved, and it has to continue to be involved. But it is changing the way we do what we've been doing. And Rev. St. Fleur mentioned Dr. Paul Farmer, and at the hearing on foreign relations that he had last Thursday, one of the questions was, how can Haiti be better? And what is it that we're going to do to rebuild Haiti? And the one thing he said, and he was on point, and he said several things, but he said we must change the aid machinery to Haiti. We must change the way we allocate money into Haiti. And NGOs are wonderful, missionaries are great, and in terms of groups that are coming in to do the right thing, and we love that and we think it's important. But Partners in Health has set a stage. They've been there for over 25 years, and they've employed over 5,000 Haitians in Haiti who are providing health services, who are going into neighborhoods, who are speaking to people, making sure that people take their medications on time. And so we are going to have to seriously work on that and look at that. And whether it's USAID that does not, and there's a, in terms of the policy of not really funding or helping governments. And so one of the pieces we are going to have to work on is how do we build capacity? How do we stabilize the state of Haiti? And when we talk about the Ministry of Health, and it was great, you talked about roads and transportation. How do we improve the public works system? And so when we talk about folks coming into Haiti, it's wonderful, but we have to be able to help the government sustain itself. And no doubt about it, over years and years, there's been issue of corruption. So I'm not saying to support a certain group coming in. I'm saying supporting infrastructure. It's public works, it's sanitation, it's architecture. It's really working on regulation and policies. And when you talk to people on Haiti, they'll say, hey, we do have regulations. We do have policies. Not quite enforcement, not enforcement. But the other piece is that when money is given to NGOs or other entities, they don't really have to communicate to the government, right? Because if you are allowed to do things in a certain way, then you don't necessarily have to have that conversation with the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Education or different ministries. And so I think that's going to be important. How do we change the paradigm in the way we deal with Haiti with the funding mechanism? And that is very key. And Dr. Farmer said it. He was in Rwanda. And when he was in, he mentioned how Rwanda was the poorest nation. The poorest nation. And one of the things he talked about was that when the government restructured, they did new rules for NGOs, and half of the NGOs left the country because of the rules. So those are the things we're going to have to talk about and really stay focused on.
Ricardo?
Well, yes,
I mean, the catastrophe in Haiti is indescribable. But it's happening on top of a society that had pretty much already collapsed. So we really have to think that we have to rebuild not just from the earthquake. We have to rebuild from a collapsed society and from a failed state where security was being provided by UN Blue Helmets, where the country had already been devastated by 4 hurricanes, and where you had the sense that it was very hard for the system to recover from it by bootstrapping from its own self. I ask you to think about what would the world have been like if the state of Louisiana was an independent state after Katrina? What would it have been like? Because pretty much everybody in Louisiana was impacted. So there was nobody to help the other. They're all victims, if you want. Actually, what happened in Katrina is that the federal government coughed up $100 billion. $100 billion is what was allocated to the recovery of New Orleans. New Orleans is smaller than Haiti. It has less population than Port-au-Prince. So I just want to throw that number out so that we have a sense of what it is that a brotherly solidarity means when it's within our borders, and what does it mean when it's outside of our borders. So just so that we get some idea on the table. Now, we don't think too much about where that water came from, where that glass comes from, where this light comes from, because in a market economy, these things happen automatically in a decentralized manner. And when the system gets sufficiently shocked, the stuff doesn't work anymore. And so if you can send money to Haiti, you'd say, what would happen if I send money to Haiti? Well, if you send money to Haiti, you think, well, they're poor. You send them money, they will be able to buy more food, or they'll be able to buy more tents, or they'll be able to buy more electricity. No, because the food, the tents, the electricity are just not there. You send the money, and just the same food and electricity is going to go up in price. It's not going to be translated into more goods because the market has broken down. So we need to recreate that market. And after we recreate that functioning market so that these things start coming in, then we need to rebuild. Now here, it's very important to think a little bit about how do you rebuild when the thing has collapsed, and you want to rebuild from the things that have not collapsed. So the first thing to note, and I think it's an important element to note, is that Haiti is not an island. Haiti is not an island. Haiti is a part of an island. There's another part to the island. That's the part of the island that got the JetBlue aircraft, and that got the helicopters and the president that could help, right? So you try to rebuild from the stuff that still works. So I think we should think of this recovery as the recovery of the island. From the island. That makes the task more manageable. If you send money to Haiti, that money can buy food in the Dominican Republic and ship it into Haiti. You don't necessarily have to cost the cost of air travel from the US. There is a market that is sort of working around Haiti, and we can leverage that market to address Haiti's problems. Now, this recovery is going to cost a lot of money, and there's enormous goodwill to do this task, not just in the US, in the international community, and in Latin America. Haiti is not just the poorest country in this region. It is miles away from the next one. It is extremely poor. In the island of Hispaniola, the minimum wage in the Dominican Republic is $260 a month. The minimum wage in Haiti is $68 a month. Okay? In the same island of Hispaniola. Okay? So this has to give us some ideas of how it is that we're going to move forward. First, we need tons of money. We need tons of money. And we have to make sure that we get the international community to cough up the money. Second, we need a governance structure. We cannot think of Haiti as a country that already had a full functioning government before the earthquake, because security was not being provided by the state. security was already being provided by the Blue Helmets. That was before the earthquake. We have a weakened government. Now, I think the crucial thing for a society to develop in the long run is institutions. But we are not going to start by building Haiti's institutions before we build Haiti's power and water and homes and jobs. So we face a real dilemma. We need to have a Haitian face in the recovery. We need to have a Haitian authority in the recovery. But we need to have a working government in the process of that buildup. And I have seen the case of Kosovo, where the European Union took stewardship of the process and then handed it over to the Kosovars. And the Kosovars now have a functioning state, and they're very happy. There's no more EU involvement there, but it's working. It's working. So I think that we have to think creatively as to what is the governance structure that we need in this recovery. And it's not going to be orthodox. It's going to be weird. We want, at the top, some Haitian inspirations, but we want executing agencies and capacity to perform that is not going to rely only on the talent that remains in Haiti. This is going to be a major undertaking. Third, I think we need to prevent the typical problem of recovery, which is that you have a ton of money coming from abroad and it's all going to construction and things like that. Because when the construction is over, there are no more jobs left. There's nothing that has been built that are permanent jobs. We need to create those permanent jobs as we reconstruct. And it is fairly easy to create some of these permanent jobs right now in the garment industry and in light manufacturers. The Dominican Republic just lost some 80,000 jobs in garments to China and other parts of the world. Some of the companies in the Dominican Republic have relocated to Haiti. So they do the more high-skilled parts in the Dominican Republic, and they do the final stitching and so on in Haiti. I think that is an interesting model to leverage. We can put 100,000, 200,000 jobs in garments in Haiti within 4 or 5 years. To do that, we have to treat the whole island as a special zone, so that you can bring the materials from the Dominican Republic, process them in Haiti, and get to the US without tariffs, get to Europe without tariffs, and so on. Right now, that is not allowed by HOPE. HOPE is the Haitian Opportunities for something, I don't know what, HOPE, HOPE. I think, let's change the H for Hispaniola, which is the name of the island, right? And there you could have all those jobs that were lost in the Dominican Republic reappear in Haiti, so that we would have a relationship that is not unlike the relationship that, if you want, Taiwan and mainland China had, or Hong Kong and mainland China had, or Korea and mainland China have, in the sense that some of the activities take place in Korea, they get finally reassembled in China. I think that is in the feasible set. You can imagine the recreation of some industrial zones, maybe near the border, maybe on the northern coast, in different areas where this could happen. So we build not just the reconstruction of what was there, we build the industrial capacity that is going to generate the Haitian jobs for the future. So to conclude, I think we need a ton of money. I think we need a governance structure that is going to be peculiar. I think we need to figure out the reconstruction, but I think we also need the permanent jobs, and the permanent jobs now and not later, and that they are feasible. Let me stop there.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if members of the panel want to comment on any of these, and I want to kind of raise an issue of my own and ask if you would comment on it. I have been struck in reading the news reports and watching on TV recently the number of people who seem to be getting on buses and going back to their villages in the countryside in Haiti. Large numbers of them, and indeed being encouraged, I gather, by the government to leave Port-au-Prince and go back to villages in the countryside. And I've actually visited several villages in the countryside, which struck me as, if anything, even poorer than Port-au-Prince, and that the ability of those villages to support the people who are coming back to them seems like it's really quite minimal. And I wonder, you may want to comment on this, Ricardo, and then the rest of you may want to comment on the kind of general idea of recovery. Is part of the strategy for recovery also a strategy that focuses on the rural areas to which people are returning, as well as the cities which have been destroyed?
There have been, before the earthquake, there was a strategy for agricultural development in Haiti. Haiti is allocating a lot of its land to produce corn. There are plenty of higher value products that could be produced there, but corn provides some minimum subsistence security to farms, to rural people. Many are trapped in very low productivity activities in rural areas. I think that anything that can be done, and the Dominican Republic is a fantastic example here, of growing much higher value-added products in those areas and just importing the corn or the cereals that, the tropics is not the ideal place to grow cereals, is something that obviously could be done. There's, if you just take the examples of the Dominican Republic, the production of fruit, the production of cocoa, the production of bananas, mangoes, are easy to grow there. It's the right general conditions. Haiti has an impossible erosion problem that we know, so the land has been enormously degraded. But I do not think that you are going to get hundreds of thousands of jobs in agriculture. I think you might raise the standard of living of those already there. I don't think that's where you're going to get the job creation. Let's remind ourselves that the Haitians have figured out that it's much easier to earn your living outside of Haiti and send money back than it is to earn a living in Haiti. And that's why Haiti has one of the ratios of remittances to GDP that is highest in the world. It was already a difficult situation there. So I would say, let's do everything we can to improve agricultural productivity. It's feasible because it has happened in the Dominican Republic, and we know what technologies work there.
I think we have some comments here.
Right.
Representative Ford.
Yes. Okay. First, the first piece about the rural communities in terms of absorbing these large amounts of people coming in and migrating from Port-au-Prince, the area that was devastated. That's going to be a serious issue because, the infrastructure they had in place could not even sustain those that were there now. And so when you have thousands and thousands of people coming in, food and water is not even getting there. So there has to be a plan strategically in terms of how is the military and USAID and all these organizations going to move food into these areas to make sure that people are able to sustain themselves. I think the piece, first real quick, you mentioned that Haitians coming here. I think all immigrants come here to America because it is an amazing place to live with opportunity in terms of providing for families. So yes, Haitians immigrated here, but a lot of them would love to stay home. A lot of people who are here working, have gone back to purchase land and to build a retirement home. I think that if you look at the history of Haiti, Haiti was able to provide and raise rice, was able to manufacture sugar and also mango plants. But again, it's taking a new look. In terms of the mango plants in Haiti, all of them are situated in Port-au-Prince. And that was kind of a law right, where you couldn't build manufacturers outside of Port-au-Prince. Well, that's something that's going to have to be revisited, is that if Port-au-Prince is made for 350 people, 350,000 people are coming to Port-au-Prince for jobs and for work. But I do think that we have an opportunity. You know, it's going to be planting season soon, you know, for Haiti to try to recapture in terms of the agricultural piece. We are going to have to focus there in terms of the rice that they were able to produce before. And so I think that's going to have to be a conversation that takes place.
I always like to take a step back because I'm a convener, and Linda's, you know, we're all together, of 22 Haitian American elected officials from across the country, because I want to make this point absolutely clear. We categorically support the sovereignty of the state of Haiti. And we categorically oppose, and we represent a significant people in Chicago, Florida, New York, here in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, of all places. We have a Haitian American elected in New Hampshire. So we categorically support the sovereignty of Haiti and oppose the idea of receivership, which has been articulated in some corners, because I do see Kosovo as well as East Timor as very different things. These were governments that were absent, totally gone. We've allowed for receivership in a couple of instances, as I know of, where there's no government or we've overthrown the government. I mean, those are the areas where we've done it. And that's not the case here. It is a weak state. It is a failed state, and everybody recognizes that. However, it is a democratically elected government, and we in this country should not get in the business of moving away from that basic concept that we respect other countries' sovereignty. Now, the idea of accompaniment, I think, is one that's very important. It is a weak state that needs the support and the technical assistance and the resources to become a better state. And so I think that is where the paradigm switches in terms of how we think about Haiti. I mean, Haiti, if we recall, was occupied by the United States from 1990. My father was born under occupation. He was born in 1922. My mother was born under occupation. She was born in 1933. So we've done a number of routes. And by the way, the Haitian government did not get there by itself. We've helped support it in many ways. France and America and a host of others have been deeply involved in the business of Haiti for a very long time. So it did not sort of get there by itself. Papa Doc, which was the reason why my family immigrated, didn't sort of hang around on his own. He had a lot of support for hanging around. And so, there is that issue that we need to look at. And so for the first time, though, we have an opportunity to sort of take a clean look at this government that is not functioning. And when we say government, I always say that you have to look at pockets of it. The national government may not have been functioning, but I ask you, if you go to Cape Haitian and you sit down, because I've done that, there is functioning legislatures in Haiti and different pockets of Haiti where the mayors are running. I mean, I was born in Grand-Rivière-du-Nord, and it's a perfectly functioning town. My relatives were the mayors of that town for many years. I mean, so there are pockets where it's operating. It's as if we can take some states in the United States and say, look at the government, it's corrupt, but we have an overall structure that at least prevents us from all falling apart. Our problem is in Haiti is that the federal government or the national government does not function. But before we there's a whole system in place of legislature, the Kazakhs, the various organizations that's currently in place, a structure that's in place, and we need to figure out how we support that where it's working, and where it's not working, we need to figure out how to help them to do better, rather than sort of saying we're just going to wipe that out, because the government is not simply the minister and the president. There's all the Jacques Mel was a functioning town, and what was a functioning town with a functioning government. Delma has a functioning mayor. So there are places where it's functioning, but it does not have the coordination or that we have in other places. So I just want us to be careful when we talk about and by the way, the rest of the country is still alive, and they're now receiving these folks from Port-au-Prince. And the folks in Port-au-Prince didn't happen to get there on their own. Duvalier used to go get them from the countryside and bring them into Port-au-Prince. He did do that and began this mass exodus from the cities and towns into Port-au-Prince. And then what we did then, when we concentrated every aid, every financial resource, we concentrated it all in Port-au-Prince and didn't bother to build the outside, the outlying. And that's what we have. We have to decentralize the way we provide resources and what have you. So I think there's a lot to work there with if we choose to look at it. It's like when we talk to people in Haiti, I remember when I was a kid, everybody's saying they're coming to the United States. Well, the only place they think about is they're coming to New York. Well, New York is not the United States, just like Port-au-Prince is not Haiti, and there's more to it than that, and we have to look beyond that.
Thanks. I want to open up, oh, sorry, yes.
Well, I just want to make one brief comment. As perhaps a more typical American who's not steeped in the government of Haiti, I mean, naturally, I wanted to learn more about it. I have Haitian students here. We have a group called Haitian Alliance. And over the years, we've brought a number of speakers here to kind of enlighten the community about aspects of Haiti and Haitian culture. We hosted Jean Bertrand Aristide through the Harvard Foundation. We've had other guests come through here. We had his wife come through to talk to us about aid to Haiti. So a number of things over the years, but I think the American people are still so unknowledgeable of Haiti. And when you hear the kind of comments made by one of the American ministers who said the most horrible and atrocious thing about some pact with the devil, I mean, this is the kind of thing that's so misleading to people who really want to help. And you know, when you start, I think so many Americans tragically look at Haiti outside of the government perspective, but just a failed society. And that may be very unfair, and I think what you're expressing sort of challenges that. I met with a group some years back to talk about, after the hurricanes, how can we prevent so much erosion in Haiti? You brought that up. Well, the erosion didn't just take place by chance. Right away, people project, well, the Haitians are cutting their trees down for fuel. That's only partly true. When I researched this, I found, and there are articles in the New York Times you can follow up on this with, there are whole towns in France that are built on the lumber from Haiti. Haiti paid reparations up through World War II for their freedom. They were enslaved by Europeans, and the French never give up, it seems. They kept coming back and demanding reparations from the Haitian people. So right there you have this problem. So there have been payments. All the trees have essentially disappeared. When you try to plant these trees there, you're talking about the lush side of the Dominican Republic. They got a lot of support. People from Haiti have been enslaved in some cases, we found. I mean, there's so many things we could go on with. We don't have time. Plate tectonics. I asked my physicist friends, why did they notify people more vigorously about the fact that those plates would slide easily under Port-au-Prince right there? The plates that are moving go right under the major city. It seems to me somebody should have notified people about that. So there are many different aspects of this that will not be discussed here tonight. As we enlighten America about what has happened in Haiti, it's not just failed because the people fail. There are very industrious and brilliant people in Haiti who really want to make their country work. But when you look at all these forces, such as the New York Times pointed out, taking all the lumber out and sending it to France, it should stay there in Haiti, or we should rebuild it in some way. So there are many things like this we could discuss, but I'll go on for the questions.
Okay, let's open up for questions. We have, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. There are 2 microphones, one here and one here. I don't think we have microphones upstairs, do we? Okay, there's one there too. Okay, very good. One microphone upstairs. So let's start over here. I should remind you of the rules of the forum, which you have only heard 750 times, which is when you ask a question, please identify yourself. Please keep your question short and to the point, and please have your question end with a question mark.
Hi, George Bryant from Revolution Books, and just to pursue this question of opening our eyes in a changing paradigm, 2 very important things that were posed by the panel, and open our eyes first about what has been the United States' role in Haiti, in contemporary Haiti, in supporting dictatorships, and in terms of impoverishing that island. The deforestation and destruction of the rural agriculture. You know, the Reagan years, they forced the Haitians to kill all the native pigs, destroyed the whole living in pigs. They undercut their rice crops, forced them to import cheaper rice from the U.S., so all the farmers had to move to the city and beg for a job in the sweatshops. And is the only option we can offer today is this paradigm of sweatshop jobs. I mean, you're talking about people making maybe 40 cents an hour, and that's supposed to be the great hope of a new paradigm. Can't we offer a better paradigm than that? Is that all capitalism can offer Haiti?
Do I infer that that's a question to Ricardo?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can accept all the stories about American imperialism. You might know that I'm from Venezuela, and stories about American imperialism are, you know, every other minute in national radio. So I would just ponder, why would the US be so obsessed about destroying Haiti vis-a-vis the rest of the continent? Because Haiti is significantly poorer than the rest of the continent. I wonder why the US hasn't plundered the rest as much as it has plundered Haiti. So I do not believe that you can account for Haiti's problems as a consequence of US imperialism. I think we have to look deeply at the things that made such a strong, hardworking, intelligent people, the first ones to become liberated from colonialism after the US, why it turned out so poorly. And I think that Jared Diamond in his book Collapse has a chapter on Haiti that is very interesting to read. And I think that we cannot walk away from those real problems. Blaming the US for that, I don't think is going to get us anywhere. But starting with jobs of what the Haitians can make now and building their capabilities so that they can move to higher value products is the only road I know forward. And it's the only one that could get them not the jobs that you wish they had now, but jobs much better than the ones they have now, and income earning possibilities that are much better than what they have. So that's what I can say.
Question over here.
My name is Yves Cajuste, and I host a weekly TV show on Comcast for Haitian. And before, I ask, the question, a lot of good ideas have been thrown out this afternoon. But before I ask the question, I would say all those ideas, I think, Mary Saint-Fleur, for the past 3 years, has been advocating for long-term plan for Haiti. But the problem, we should do this for Haiti, we should do that for Haiti. I didn't hear anyone say how we're going to do it. I know there was a meeting in Montreal. No one from this panel, Mrs. Saint-Fleur wasn't there. Next month at the United Nations, there will be another one. I have been covering all those meetings for years. But people in the diaspora, they are not around the table. The UN, someone from the State Department, the USAID, the EU, the Brazilian, will be deciding the future of Haiti. All those ideas, guys, how are you going to, do you plan to have a seat at the table when the future of Haiti will be decided?
Let me get a couple more questions and then ask for people to respond. Yes.
My name is Marie-Ange Bunga. I'm a mid-career student here at Harvard Kennedy School. I'm from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I'm saying that because I would like to pay homage to the people of Haiti who in the 60s and the 70s came to the Congo to help in technical cooperation as teachers, as nurses, and many of them actually are born in the Congo before going back to Haiti, or actually to New York. I think that maybe the way of thinking actually is my presence here, and also the government has been sending $2.5 million, even though the Democratic Republic of the Congo itself is a really weak and some people also failed state. So my question is related to the question that was already asked before, and it's more specifically to the diaspora. Can you tell me if there's any kind of initiative between the Asian American diaspora here and the Haiti people there and maybe the Haitian leaders, because I've heard some people who went there and they complained that there was no leadership to take care of all the different kind of aid relief that is happening there. So that's my question. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that?
Okay, first I want to thank Yves for your question and your comment. And I do think that, that is something we are going to have to deal with in terms of the Haitian diaspora. And we talked about technology, and we talked about the Haitian diaspora unifying. And I would say that, we have a lot of work to do. And, the work is, and Rep. St. Fleur and I, we were working on this before, created the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network. We talked about the 22 Haitian American electeds in this country, where we've had meetings back in October when we first formed to talk about the dynamic between Haiti and the U.S. And how is it that when we're talking about development, that we will have the Haitian diaspora's voice at the table. But you're right. I mean, every day is a struggle. We are on the phone it is. We are on the phone every day. The governor has done a great job in terms of mobilizing his team. He has just actually issued this executive order that would allow state employees to contribute to a sick bank, where if Haitian Americans would want to go to Haiti for 30 days or for a long extended period of time, that would be allowed. So that is a good thing, but we have a lot of work to do because it's really raising that voice. I mean, we could sit at the table and we say it all the time, all these conference calls, we need to get the Haitian community plugged in, who's at the table, but we need the Haitian diaspora to be behind us as well as we do talk about the situation and really getting our voices heard.
This is going to have to be the last question.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Leroy Foster. I'm a second-year student here at the Kennedy School, and thank you all for taking this time here with us tonight. I was wondering, as Haiti begins to rebuild, would you rather see the United Nations or the United States as a lead partner in that effort? And if this idea of a lead partner, perhaps that's a bad way of thinking of it, so what sort of instrument could be used to, I guess, focus the international community to rebuild Haiti, along with, obviously, Haitians?
If you ask me on my personal, Marie St. Fleur, the personal, I'd rather see the United States take the lead. We have the largest, number of Haitian and Haitian Americans and big resources. We have the largest number of Haitians and Haitian Americans outside of that country living. In terms of the number of 10% of the black doctors in the United States are Haitian American. Our engineers, our accountants, the brain trust that exists that can help in the rebuilding. See, that's what we're talking about. I'm Haitian American, but I have not lived in Haiti all my life. And so I can't walk into Haiti and start telling people in Haiti what to do. I do think that they have to have a hand in, just like when I represent Upham's Corner in Dorchester. And I always resent when folks come in and just tell us how to run our lives. Because I think that we should be empowering people in their communities to be able to make a difference in their lives. And so we're supposed to walk with them in that walk. And so we're supposed to try to provide the technical assistance. We're supposed to provide the resources. I think the United States, if that had my druthers, that's where I would like to see the lead, because we are involved in every level of government as well as civil society in the United States. It's closest. We have a particular interest because when people leave Haiti, they come here. When they get on a boat, they get on the boat and go to Florida. They don't go to France. They don't go to Brazil. They don't go to Argentina. They come here. So we have a particular interest in making sure that that island, that half of the island, focuses. So that would be my druthers. I understand that there's a whole UN structure, what have you. The other thing I want to say, Haitians are the most peaceful people I know, okay? Because for the most part, they've been managing themselves. And I'm not talking about the little cities where you see most of the trouble. But when you think about it, you've got 9 million people that's on one half of the island, all right? You've had less than 2,000 police officers across the country for many years. Minutsa, when you talk about Minutsa, I've been on the island. That part of the island, that country. They're only in certain areas. Okay, when I go to Cape Haitian, when I go to Milo, I don't see Minutsas. Okay, I see Haitian people policing themselves. And if any place else, what we are seeing on the ground in Haiti would have been worse But there are people who've learned to do without for so long, they've managed to discipline themselves. And so I do think that that is the blessing of the real people that are on the ground in Haiti, and what we owe them is the right to be independent and is the right to support them through what they've been able to live through themselves. They're not helpless people. So they're not asking for a handout, they're asking for support.
Can I just quickly say that I think the entire world needs to reach out and help Haiti. I saw something that moved me very deeply. I saw people from all backgrounds, white, black, Hispanic, Asian. They were working, helping people. They were from South America throughout. They were from Europe. They were from Canada. And they were really helping the Haitian people. And it touched me very deeply to see people of all backgrounds coming together. So the whole world needs to reach out. But I think especially in the United States, we must continue to educate people about the history of Haiti and who the people of Haiti are, the embargoes that we've held against Haiti, all the things we've done. Americans must come to know. Haiti fought with us in Louisiana to get American freedom. Haiti fought with us in Savannah. So we owe the Haitians a great deal. They protected Simon Bolivar so that he could go back and become head of Venezuela. So that we owe a great deal to the Haitian people. And I think it's time to enlighten Americans about the history of Haiti and how much they've helped us. And it's our time and the world helped them.
I think that there's plenty of support for Haiti. That's not the problem. There is plenty of support for Haiti. The question is, how do we organize that support? And here I would like to say that sovereignty is not a 0-1 idea. Countries in Europe have surrendered sovereignty to the European Union because they'd rather have common policies than sovereign policies. In Africa, where the aid community does not trust the government, it doesn't give the money to the government. It creates parallel organizations. When you have the IMF intervene and negotiate policies, you no longer have a sense of 0-1 sovereignty. So sovereignty, we have to understand that we need to structure the governance structure so that it works. I say Haitians have to make the political decisions of how it is that they want to rebuild and where it is that they want to rebuild. But in the same way as the executing agency for security is now the blue helmets, we will need the executing agencies for infrastructure, the executing agencies for water, the executing agencies for a set of things to be allocated to organizations that can do that effectively in the short run. And finally, right now, the UN has chosen not the US to provide security, it has chosen Brazil to provide security. Brazil has been there for now years. So when the international community decides to give people different roles, I think there's plenty of countries that can participate and choose from. Brazil is the lead right now. Having said that, I thank God for the Southern Command of the US that was able to put 10,000 people there in 3 or 4 days. Without that, I don't know what would be the catastrophe we were talking about. Thank God that the US had that capacity and that commitment, and it has exhibited in a remarkable way.
Well, it's clear from the conversation tonight that this will be a continuing conversation. And I think one of the themes that comes out is that we need to have a continuing education of ourselves and our communities about Haiti and about the things that we can do together with the leadership, of course, of the Haitian people to rebuild the country. So please join me in thanking all the panelists. And this is a conversation to be continued. Thank you so much.
Thank you.